Here's your text with proper punctuation. I own a quiet little farm on the edge of town, the kind of place where the smell of fresh hay and the occasional bleat from a mischievous goat make up the daily soundtrack. It's peaceful, simple, and completely mine, until HOA Karen decided otherwise. Now I don't belong to the HOA. My farm sits outside its jurisdiction, separated by a line of trees and a strong personal desire to avoid their nonsense. But that's never stopped Karen, the self-proclaimed ruler of the suburban development next door, from poking her nose into my business. Over the years she's complained about my unruly animals, my unsightly barn, and even had the audacity to suggest I install a white picket fence to make my property look more neighborly. I ignored her as much as possible, until she gave me no choice. It started with an unexpected visit. Karen showed up in my driveway in her usual attire. Oversized sunglasses, a cardigan that screamed authority, and an expression that suggested I owed her something. She wasn't alone. A few HOA members, equally overdressed for standing next to a goat pen, flanked her like backup dancers in a suburban-themed Broadway show. "Jake," she said, all smiles, which immediately put me on edge. "I have great news." I doubted that very much. "My niece is getting married this weekend," she continued, "and we've decided your barn would be the perfect venue." It took me a second to process what she just said. "You decided?" She nodded enthusiastically, launching into some spiel about how my rustic setting was all the rage these days, and how everyone agreed it was just what her niece needed for a magical wedding. "No," I said flatly. Karen's smile faltered. "Excuse me." I said no. "That's not happening." She let out a short laugh as if I were joking. "Oh, come on, Jake. It's just one evening. You wouldn't even have to do anything. We'll handle the setup, the cleanup, everything. We just need the space." I folded my arms. "And you thought you'd just take it?" Her expression hardened. "We thought you'd be a good neighbor." I wasn't in the mood for whatever passive-aggressive guilt trip she had prepared, so I shut it down quickly. "This isn't a discussion. My farm isn't an event space. Find somewhere else." Karen's lips thinned, her hands tightening around the clipboard she'd brought. "I see," she said stiffly. "Well, I hope you reconsider." I didn't. But apparently, Karen didn't think my answer mattered. The morning of the wedding, I woke up to the unmistakable sound of people bustling around my property. At first, I thought maybe the goats had gotten into something again. But when I stepped outside, I found my barn had been transformed overnight. Rows of chairs were neatly arranged. Delicate white lights were strung from the rafters. Expensive flowers lined the walkway leading up to what was now an altar. A catering tent had popped up beside my pasture, and well-dressed strangers milled about, putting the final touches on someone else's wedding. I stood there in stunned silence. Karen spotted me and hurried over, her face glowing with satisfaction. "Oh good, you're up. Doesn't it look wonderful?" My hands curled into fists at my sides. "Karen, what the hell?" She waved off my fury with a dismissive laugh. "Oh, don't be dramatic. We knew you'd come around." "I never. You can't just take over my property." She clicked her tongue. "We'll be done in a few hours. Just keep the animals out of the way, okay? We can't have goats running around during the ceremony." I was livid. Every rational part of me screamed to shut this whole thing down immediately. Call the police, throw everyone out, raise hell. But then I looked around. The wedding guests were already arriving, dressed in suits and dresses, completely oblivious to the fact that their picturesque venue was stolen. The caterers were setting up food. A woman in a flowing white dress, presumably Karen's niece, was chatting excitedly with the bridesmaids. If I forced them out now, I'd be the villain. Karen had set this up too well. I clenched my jaw. "Fine," I said through gritted teeth. "But I'm not lifting a finger to help." Karen beamed. "That's the spirit." I stormed off, fuming, as she turned back to bark orders at a group of decorators. My goats clustered near the fence, watching me expectantly. "Don't look at me," I muttered. "I hate this as much as you do." Benny, my most troublesome goat, tilted his head. I sighed. "Come on. Let's go lock you guys up before Karen loses her mind over barnyard ambience." Except in all my frustration, I forgot one very important detail. I forgot to actually lock the gate. As the sun began to set and the guests settled into their seats, I sat on my porch, arms crossed, watching the event unfold with simmering irritation. Then came the first scream. I looked up just in time to see Benny trotting into the reception area, a floral centerpiece trailing from his mouth like some sort of prize. Oh no! More goats followed. Hoofs clattered against the wooden floor of my barn-turn venue. They moved like a coordinated chaos team, overturning tables, investigating trays of hors d'oeuvres, and most devastatingly, devouring the 3-tier wedding cake in record time. The shrieks of horror were music to my ears. Karen's niece screamed as a particularly ambitious goat stole her veil and pranced away like he'd won the Kentucky Derby. The best man made the mistake of trying to stop them and ended up sprawled on the ground, defeated. Karen's face turned an astonishing shade of red. Jake! I leaned back in my chair and sipped my lemonade. Huh, that's weird. I thought I locked the gate. Karen was too busy shrieking into her phone to respond. It wasn't until I heard her say the words, "I need emergency goat removal services," that I realized she had actually called 911. I nearly choked laughing. The goats were on their farm. They weren't trespassing. Karen was. And the best part? There wasn't a damn thing she could do about it. The moment Karen shrieked into her phone demanding immediate goat removal services, I knew this night was about to reach legendary status. Her arms flailed as she tried to corral the goats, a mission that was doomed from the start. Benny, my smartest troublemaker, had already figured out where the real fun was. The buffet table. The rest of my herd? They were more than happy to follow his lead. It started with the salad station. Benny took one sniff of the mixed greens before making a clear judgment. Asterisk asterisk not worth it asterisk asterisk. He shoved the bowl aside, sending a cascade of lettuce flying into the air before moving on to the good stuff. The meat carving station. A shrill scream pierced the night as Daisy, a particularly determined goat, expertly dodged a horrified caterer and sank her teeth into a prime rib. Karen lost her last shred of dignity. She darted between tables, shrieking at the goats as if they had suddenly decided to obey her HOA president authority. "Get out! Get out!" she screeched, flailing her arms like an air traffic controller who had lost control of the runway. The problem? Goats don't care about authority. One particularly bold goat, Tucker, locked eyes with Karen. They had a brief standoff, her nostrils flaring, his little goat brain deciding whether she was a threat. Then, in a moment of divine poetic justice, he lunged for the bottom of her dress and gave it a mighty tug. Karen stumbled backward, arms pinwheeling, before she landed smack in the middle of the wedding cake table. Somewhere in the distance, a champagne tower followed suit, crashing to the ground in a glorious symphony of breaking glass. Karen, covered head to toe in cake, let out an ear-piercing scream. "Jake, do something." I took a slow sip of my lemonade. Looks like they're really enjoying the reception. Here's your text with proper punctuation. 911, I need the police immediately. The dispatcher must have had a rough day already because I could hear the exhaustion through the phone. "Ma'am, what is your emergency? We are under attack." A pause. "By whom?" Karen made a strangled noise. "Goats. Goats." I had to bite my tongue to keep from laughing too hard. The dispatcher took an audible breath before replying. "Ma'am, are the goats armed?" Karen's screech could probably be heard 3 towns over. The bride, bless her heart, had to sit down, she was laughing so hard. Several guests had given up entirely, and were just taking videos of the chaos, already uploading clips of the Great Goat Wedding crash to social media. Meanwhile, Karen was hysterically insisting that the police round up these criminal goats before they completely destroyed the reception. To my absolute disbelief, flashing red and blue lights appeared at the edge of my driveway. 2 officers stepped out of the car, taking in the scene before them, goats gleefully feasting on what remained of the wedding spread, guests either cowering or filming, and a woman in a ruined dress, dripping with frosting, gesturing wildly as if she had just witnessed a high-speed chase. One of the officers, clearly trying not to smirk, turned to me. What exactly is going on here?" Before I could answer, Karen shoved past me, panting. "This man, this irresponsible man, let his filthy farm animals ruin my niece's wedding. Arrest him. Get rid of the goats. Do something." The officer blinked. "Wait, you're saying his goats ruined your wedding?" "Yes. He allowed them to terrorize us. My guests eat our food and..." She gestured wildly to her frosting-covered self. Completely sabotaged this entire event. The officers exchanged glances. And whose property are we standing on? Karen's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. One of the officers turned to me. Sir, do you know this woman? Oh, very well, I said cheerfully. She and her HOA friends decided to trespass on my property and host a wedding here without my permission. The officer raised an eyebrow. So she used your barn, without consent? Yep. And now she's mad that your own animals are on your own land? Pretty much. The officer slowly turned back to Karen. Ma'am, did you obtain a permit for this wedding? Karen went pale. Because, he continued, flipping open a notepad, I'm looking at quite a few violations here. Trespassing, illegal event planning, unauthorized use of private property. Karen sputtered. But, no need to explain. You'll be receiving a fine. And I strongly suggest you wrap this event up before we start looking into additional penalties. I thought Karen might actually explode. Instead, she let out a high-pitched, frustrated screech before storming away, leaving a frosting-covered trail in her wake. The guests, realizing there was no saving the night, started laughing it off. The bride, still wiping away tears of amusement, walked up to me and grinned. Best wedding ever, she said. Seriously, I owe you. I gestured to the buffet table, which was currently being pillaged by goats. Feel free to take whatever's left. As the guests slowly trickled out, leaving behind a mess of overturned tables and hay-covered linens, I leaned against my porch rail, watching the aftermath with pure satisfaction. The goats, victorious, had claimed the barn as their own once more. Karen had lost everything, her dignity, her stolen wedding venue, and probably the last bit of patience from the neighborhood. And best of all, she had no one to blame but herself. By the next morning, my farm was famous. I woke up to a flood of notifications on my phone, texts, missed calls, and most hilariously videos. Apparently, wedding guests had documented every second of the chaos. And by sunrise, the Great Goat wedding crash had gone viral. Clips of Benny demolishing the buffet table, Karen shrieking into the phone, and the moment a goat unceremoniously yanked off the bride's veil were now making their rounds on social media. One video in particular stood out. A slow-motion replay of Karen toppling into the wedding cake, complete with dramatic background music. Someone had even added the words Karen's downfall in bold, flashing letters. I almost felt bad. Almost. But the real surprise, Karen's niece, the bride, had shared it herself with the caption, * best wedding ever. 10 out of 10. Would do again. *. If that weren't enough, a local news station picked up the story. Their segment was titled * farm wedding gone wrong. Or right? * and featured a split screen of my goats prancing through the wedding, while a reporter tried to keep a straight face. I was sipping my coffee, enjoying every second of it, when a knock sounded at my door. It was Greg, one of my less annoying neighbors from the HOA side of town. He was grinning ear to ear, his phone in hand. Man, he said, holding it up. Do you know how many people have seen this? Enough to make Karen's blood pressure spike? I guessed. Oh, way more than that. He scrolled. She's in every neighborhood chat group, losing her mind. She's trying to blame you for sabotaging the wedding. I snorted. Pretty sure she sabotaged herself. Greg chuckled. The HOA board seems to agree. There's already talk of voting her out. That got my attention. Karen had ruled over the HOA for years, treating it like her personal kingdom. If this wedding fiasco was finally enough to dethrone her, then I owed my goats extra treats later. That afternoon, I ran into a few more HOA members at the local feed store. They weren't exactly subtle about it, whispering, exchanging looks, but eventually one of them, Nancy, cleared her throat and approached me. We wanted to let you know, she said hesitantly, that there's going to be a meeting. A meeting? I echoed. Yes. She hesitated. About Karen. I played dumb. Oh? Did something happen? Nancy exhaled sharply. Look, none of us liked what she did. We didn't know she was using your barn without permission, and, well, you saw the videos. I sure had. She sighed. Anyway, she's lost a lot of support. The vote's next week. If it goes through, she's out. I nodded, pretending to consider it. Well, I said, I'd hate to interfere in HOA matters, seeing as I'm not part of the HOA. Nancy coughed, looking vaguely embarrassed. Right. Of course. That was all I needed to hear. For the rest of the week, Karen fought tooth and nail to keep her position. She sent out frantic emails, made desperate house calls, and even tried organizing a Save the HOA event, which no one attended. The wedding disaster had been too much. People were tired of her rules, tired of the drama, and most of all tired of being told what they could and couldn't do by a woman who had just been publicly humiliated by a pack of goats. When the final vote came in, it wasn't even close. Karen was out. I didn't see her much after that. She still lived in the neighborhood, of course, but she kept a much lower profile. No more unsolicited complaints about my unsightly barn. No more disapproving glares when I let my chickens roam near the property line. No more surprise visits demanding I change my fence or plant different trees. It was peaceful. But I wasn't quite done yet. The next weekend I threw a goat appreciation barbecue. An idea that started as a joke but quickly gained traction when people realized it was the perfect excuse for a neighborhood party without Karen micromanaging everything. I invited everyone. Except her. Benny and the rest of the goats were the guests of honor, each sporting a little flower crown made by the bride herself. At some point during the night, I spotted Karen driving by, slowing just enough to glare from her car window. I raised my drink in a silent toast. Her face turned an impressive shade of red before she sped off. I turned back to Benny, who was happily chewing on a napkin someone had dropped. Well, buddy, I said, we won. He gave me a slow, thoughtful blink. Then he burped. It was the perfect ending.